Before Australia found its voice, one man captured it in ink and hardship. This is the raw, unfiltered story of Henry Lawson, the poet who gave the bush its soul. Henry Lawson, the voice of a nation. Early life and family roots. Henry Archibald Hertzberg Lawson was born on the 17th of June 1867 in a rough bush settlement on the Grenfell goldfields in central western New South Wales. His father, Niels Hertzberg Lawson, was a Norwegian seaman who had jumped ship in Melbourne during the gold rush and later anglicised his name to Peter Lawson. His mother, Louisa Lawson, née Albury, was a woman of considerable intellect and fierce independence. She was a poet, a publisher, and later a prominent figure in Australia's emerging feminist movement. Henry's upbringing was shaped by poverty, hardship, and the isolation of rural life. His parents' marriage was turbulent, marked by financial struggles and emotional distance. The family moved frequently, seeking work and stability. In 1873, the Lawsons settled near Urundari, where Henry attended a bush school. At the age of 9, Henry developed an ear infection that would eventually render him profoundly deaf by his teenage years. This deafness had a profound impact on his personality, contributing to his introspective nature and isolating him from other children. Despite his condition and a patchy formal education, Lawson was deeply influenced by his mother, who encouraged his interest in literature and writing. Formative years and education. Henry left school at 14 and became a coach painter's apprentice in Sydney, a trade he loathed. In his free time, he read voraciously, especially Dickens, Byron, and the Bible, and began writing poetry and short stories. He also attended night classes and attempted to improve his spelling and grammar, which were initially poor. His mother published some of his early poems in The Republican, a short-lived journal she ran promoting democratic and feminist ideals. In 1887, Lawson's first poem, A Song of the Republic, appeared in The Bulletin, a Sydney-based magazine that was instrumental in fostering Australian nationalism and a new literary voice. This publication marked the beginning of Lawson's long association with The Bulletin and launched his career as a writer. The Bulletin Years and The Bush Realist. Lawson's writings appeared regularly in The Bulletin throughout the late 1880s and 1890s. During this period, he emerged as the most prominent voice of the Australian bush realist movement. His work stood in stark contrast to the romanticised depictions of the outback offered by contemporaries like Banjo Paterson. Lawson wrote of the brutal realities of life in the bush: drought, depression, isolation, and the quiet stoicism of ordinary Australians. In 1892, the Bulletin funded a trip for Lawson to travel through Western New South Wales and write about his experiences. The result was a series of powerful sketches and short stories such as The Drover's Wife, a haunting tale of maternal strength and loneliness, On the Edge of a Plain, a meditation on silence and endurance in the vast landscape in a dry season, a stark, observational piece of travel writing. These works, published in Lawson's first collection, Short Stories in Prose and Verse, 1894, firmly established him as a master of the short story and a chronicler of rural hardship. The Bulletin Debate: Realism versus Romance. Lawson's rivalry with Banjo Paterson became famous through a poetic exchange known as the Bulletin Debate. Lawson accused Paterson of romanticising the bush and ignoring the suffering of the people who lived there. In his poem Up the Country, Lawson wrote, "I am back from up the country, very sorry that I went, seeking for the southern poet's land whereon to pitch my tent. I have lost a lot of idols which were broken on the track." Paterson responded with In Defence of the Bush, insisting there was beauty and nobility in the rural life. This public debate captured the nation's attention and reflected broader tensions about the Australian identity in the lead-up to Federation. Marriage, London, and new challenges. In 1896, Lawson married Bertha Brett Jr., the daughter of Louisa Lawson's friend and fellow suffragist. The couple had 2 children, Joseph and Bertha, but their marriage was troubled from the start. Lawson struggled with alcoholism, erratic moods, and an inability to sustain stable employment or income. Despite his rising fame, he remained impoverished. Later that year, he published In the Days When the World Was Wide, a poetry collection that became a classic of Australian literature. In 1900, Lawson moved to London hoping to expand his readership. He was supported by literary patrons and published Joe Wilson and His Mates, 1901, and Children of the Bush, 1902. While some of his best writing was produced in England, Lawson's time there was marred by worsening depression and alcoholism. He returned to Australia in 1902, broken in health and spirit, decline and despair. Upon his return, Lawson found it increasingly difficult to write. His marriage fell apart, and he was institutionalized multiple times due to his alcoholism and mental health issues. He spent time in Darlinghurst jail for failing to pay child support and was occasionally homeless, sleeping in parks or shelters. Despite his decline, he was still held in high regard. The public and literary community recognized his importance, and he received occasional support from admirers and the state. He continued to write sporadically, but his later works lacked the power and clarity of his earlier ones. His final published book was Triangles of Life and Other Stories, 1913, but by then he had become a tragic figure, one of Australia's greatest writers, living in near destitution. Death and state funeral. Henry Lawson died of a cerebral hemorrhage on the 2nd of September 1922 at the age of 55, in Sydney. His death triggered a national outpouring of grief. The New South Wales government granted him a state funeral, the first ever for an Australian writer, attended by thousands. He was buried at Waverley Cemetery overlooking the Pacific Ocean. His grave, marked with a simple monument, remains a pilgrimage site for lovers of Australian literature. Legacy and influence. Lawson's contribution to Australian cultural identity is immense. He helped define what it meant to be Australian in the pre- and post-Federation era. His work celebrated the battler, the outback, and the spirit of resilience and mateship. Major achievements and recognitions. Appeared on the Australian $10 note, 1995-2017, alongside his mother Louisa schools, towns, suburbs and parks named after him across Australia, featured in anthologies and school syllabuses for over a century, subject of plays, films and television adaptations. The Henry Lawson Festival of Arts held annually in Grenfell. Lawson's work is still widely read and studied for its vivid portrayals of bush life, its powerful empathy and its emotional resonance. His short stories, in particular, are considered among the finest in the English language. Louisa Lawson's role and influence. It is impossible to understand Henry's life without acknowledging the extraordinary influence of his mother. Louisa Lawson was a poet, publisher, and activist, founder of the pioneering women's journal, The Dawn. She was a tireless campaigner for women's rights, including suffrage, and one of the first female editors in Australia. She encouraged Henry's early writings, published his poetry, and instilled in him a passion for social justice, freedom of expression, and the written word. Though their relationship was often strained, Louisa's impact on her son's intellectual and political outlook was profound. Conclusion: a voice that still echoes Henry Lawson remains a towering figure in Australian literature. Through his poems and stories, he captured the spirit of a continent in formation, speaking for the ordinary men and women who toiled under sun and dust. He told their stories with honesty, compassion, and humour. Though his life was marred by tragedy and decline, Lawson's legacy endures. His work continues to inspire, to provoke, and to reflect the soul of a nation, raw, resilient, and real. And when your last shot has been fired and your battery's done its worst, you will say with your dying breath that I bore my burdens first. Henry Lawson. If Lawson's words stirred something in you, subscribe for more stories of the legends who shaped Australia, because our history is more than dates and names. It's the voices that still echo.